Alrighty. So, we should be live right now. Let's fade this music out all the way. Um, if we're live, chat, let us know. Let us know if you can hear us.
Can you hear us?
So, there
All
we go.
good on sound.
Yeah, all good on sound. Alrighty. If you hear meowing in the background, just gonna give a little bit of a notice here. That's my cat. My cat is a very, very curious cat, and she likes to get up to the mic a lot. So, whoop.
She's trying to get into casting. She's
Yeah,
here for the
she she
beginner.
she totally
Cool.
wants to be part of the class and totally doesn't want me to give her treats right now. Anyways, with that being said, uh, welcome, welcome to the class. Class workshop, whatever you want to call this. This is so you want to be an on-air talent. What you need to know to be unique, especially in such uh, a very ever-changing industry. Esports and broadcasting in general has been shifting a lot within the past few years, and it there are some things that I'm going to showcase today that are kind of constant. So things that will help you in your career if you're just starting out, or things if you're already well into your career might be a good little refresher. So my name is Corey. To give it a little bit of backstory on me, um, I get my diploma for broadcasting in a week. I've spent 2 years working in the radio industry, working in AM and FM stations, working across 16 different stations as a master control operator. And more recently, I've been hosting local television shows. So that's kind of my background. And then here we have Boop, our lovely guest professor today.
I'm your TA.
Yes, the TA.
So a little bit about myself. I started casting about a long time ago, actually, about 3 years ago. I started doing Hearthstone to start things off. Someone didn't show up at a LAN, and that was my opportunity to start casting. And through that, I started working with Carbon Entertainment. And if that is familiar to you, because we did Contender Season 0, and I hosted a recap show, and also did some like shoulder content for Season 0, which was the lead up to Owl. Currently, I am casting North American Contenders with Ham Tornado.
Awesome. So we have a guy here who actually knows his stuff, and then there's me
Allegedly.
who does all the theoretical stuff and is doing local television now. What is shoulder content, by the way?
Oh, so that's a really good question. The shoulder content is like the extra stuff that you see, like player interviews or like a top 5 plays, things that kind of like add to the beginning, end, and middle to your broadcast. And so that's what shoulder content is.
Alrighty, so obviously you're here. You want to be an on-air talent. So this lesson is being presented to you because you have an undying passion to be seen and or heard throughout the airwaves. You've been told that you have an amazing personality and or, that you have the face for television or radio in some cases. So if you think that this applies to you, then this class, workshop, whatever we're calling this, will teach you what you need to know to be unique in an ever-growing industry of broadcasters and content creators. So the first thing is, what is an on-air talent? Well, strictly speaking, it is any individual who appears on screen or is heard behind a microphone. In the sense of esports, it is your casters, your analysts, and of course, your loving hosts. So on-air talent is anybody who is, seen or heard in any broadcast sense. What is the main role in a broadcast setting? Well, to put it simply, they facilitate the story that is happening in front of you. So their entire job relies on, conveying important details that you might need to know. But even more importantly is they curate the best of all of the information that they have in front of them. To put it in an example for the real world, many times in a news story, you'll have breaking news, and at that moment, you need to decide what is, first off, credible information, but secondly, out of all of that information, what is the most important to hear? So while it might be nice to mention the details, sometimes it's often the simplest of information that can make a story sound just as good. As a mentor of mine once said, the audience doesn't know what you know, so to save time, cut away the extra padding to make the story flow easier and quicker.
Yeah, you can definitely get lost in the details. So a lot of people think that you have to be unique, especially with your information. But in order to really learn your role and to really advance in your career, you really do have to break it down into its simplest forms because that's what's most important. Everything else is ancillary, and you have to filter that out, and you have to tell that story to the best of your ability.
So this is a bit kind of unorthodox for what you would expect for esports, especially, but you do, regardless of what type of on air work you do, you are considered in some ways a journalist and you should follow the ABCs of journalism. So, there are three golden rules: that's accuracy, brevity, and clarity. So accuracy is the credibility of information you have. Is it fact checked? And yes, you will get fact checked by your audience. So research is an absolute must. Brevity is how concise you can make the information. So in as few words as possible, how much detail can you give about the story, and at the same time, what language do you use with it? You know, you don't want to float around a bunch of fancy words just to sound fancy. Use simple conversational language because people will not understand that. And finally, clarity is all about how you present your information. So if you aren't clear with your words, then you're not going to make sense to your audience. You need to be able to speak clearly and properly. So, obviously, when we talk about accuracy, you need to be prepped. So prep, prep, prep. I cannot stress how much I have to say to prep yourself before any type of broadcast. Doing the morning shows at radio stations, presenters will be there as early as 3 a.m. in the morning for a 6 a.m. broadcast. I've seen some of them there as early as 2 a.m. And what they're doing in that, 2 to 3 hour time slot before their morning show goes to air, they're prepping. They're getting the day's headlines. They're talking about entertainment news, stuff that's coming out that they want to talk about. They're planning their entire show, their entire 4.5 hour show in those few hours. Um, when I worked in a newsroom, a story did not even go to air without at least two sources to back it up. So even then, they would like to have a minimum of three or four if they can help it. Um, and if you always ever have a question, if you ever have to question what you're talking about, you have to just always double check it. And in worst case scenario, triple check it. It's very important, especially given, this whole broadcasting in general has been kind of subject to there's a lot of fake news and it's not right. And people now have to, they have to do a double take when they consume their content. So if you can do it to the best of your abilities and give them the best, most accurate content, then you're doing your job correctly.
And remember, when you're in front of the camera, you are the expert. And so, if you're relaying improper information, you're just providing false info, right? And so, what we do to prep the casting world for Ham and I is we do story meetings, and I'm sure we'll get to that stuff, but I want to reiterate the fact that when you're on camera, you're the expert, right? You have to act like it, you have to live it, and you have to do it as the expert. And that goes along with your prep, and your prep gets you to that expert level.
Um, so yeah, if all else fails, triple check everything. Um, as I said
Don't be afraid
previously,
to ask questions, right?
yeah, actually, if you do have questions, um, we do have a little link here. I'll be able to see them, or you can type them into the chat. Um, we will definitely do our best to get to all of them before the end of today. Um, so yeah, moving on. As I said previously, brevity is very important in this industry. Um, Everything is moving at such a rapid pace that you don't have time to draw out a long story for your audience. So take all of your information, squeeze that stuff out right away because your audience is not going to want to listen to you for 5 minutes about one thing.
Yeah, I actually want to add something onto that. So something in casting that has gotten, was really popular a while ago, has gotten a little bit less so, is the quote unquote rap god. And so rap godding is super cool, right? Like, oh, I could talk for 2.5 minutes over a fight, but at that point in time, like you're not really adding anything to that broadcast, right? And so when you're going into it with the idea of providing correct info, being the expert, and you find yourself talking for 2.5 minutes, most likely most of that is going to be filler, right? With like cool metaphors and big words. When in the meantime, your partner could be talking and providing a lot of really awesome information and adding value to it. So rap godding, used to be super cool, but now I would try to avoid that because it's a partnership when you're on camera, right? When you're casting with someone else, it's a partnership, and if you're taking too much space, you're making the whole broadcast a little weaker.
So, make sure you can turn that 5 minutes into 1 minute, basically. And, again, as I mentioned earlier, what the audience doesn't know doesn't kill them. They only need to know what is important, so you need to learn to take out the extra fluff. I learned this the hard way. I shot something a few weeks ago. Um, and I originally created the piece and edited down an 18-minute piece to 12 minutes. And then my executive producer came by and said, "Nope, too long. Turn it into 7." And he sat with me for 2 hours and watched me as I was deleting some of what I thought was very important, but he said that's where I said, it's unimportant. The audience doesn't need to know that. They don't know that you went and saw that, so why should they know about it? We do have a question in the chat. This is from Pink MacGyver. Um, with all the double and triple checking, how do you handle the stress that can accrue? Like checking and checking can make you feel more secure that it's all going to go okay, but can also stress you out. How do you deal with the nerves? For me personally, it takes some time. It takes some time to get used to, just the very fast pacedness of broadcasting. A lot of things can sometimes be last minute, and you don't have much time to do a lot of prep work. So you will most definitely be put under a lot of stress. But once you
Yeah.
find out, if you find out that one piece of information seems to be coming from multiple locations and it all seems to be stemming off of, very similar angles, then I would say it's a fairly credible source. Over time you will start to figure out on your own, what's credible, what's not, and what you can take and what you can remove. um yeah, it does get stressful if you don't know how to handle it, but over time you get that opportunity, you get to learn things, and as you go along you'll be fine. um
And like another thing to know about that too is I'll give a personal example is I was casting EU trials not too long ago and I said one of the players was from Hungary and he was from Bulgaria. And so immediately after that cast, I went on to Twitter and corrected it, right? So if you do find yourself saying something wrong, it's that's fine, right? Just you have to do your due diligence to correct it, either on social media or during the cast. Um, uh, but it's important to kind of just like not worry about it. Right, right?
yeah.
It's like you said it happened, it's out there. Leaving it out there might be the best option, it might not. Correcting it is probably the best option, but we all make mistakes. Another really good example is how to pronounce player names, right? 4 of us will pronounce the same player differently, right? In North American Contenders, it was Sharik or Sharik, right? We went and asked him, and he was like, "It's Sharik or it's Sharik." But, I don't really care what you say, right? So after we asked him, it was like It's like, "Oh, okay, you don't care, but the information is Sharik, so from here on out, I'm gonna say Sharik." Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I mean, like, the same thing happened to me just literally the other day. I was shooting for a show, and we had a guest come on, little tiny little, hand blender that you can, little frother that you put into lattes and stuff. Didn't realize that you're supposed to turn the thing on after you put it into the cup. So I just ended up making a huge mess all over the set, and you know, you just go with it. If you flub up on a word, if you can immediately after the fact pronounce it correctly or stop yourself halfway through, then nobody's going to care. But you don't need to stop and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I pronounced that incorrectly," right after the fact. It kind of ruins the flow of what you're doing.
Another really good example of that is if any of you guys are musicians, one thing you don't wanna do is, like, say you're playing a piece and you play a wrong note, you react facially, right? You've just told every single person that you've made a mistake, right? You gotta go through it confidently, right? Correct yourself if you need to, but it's really not a big deal, right? Just move on.
Yeah. Um, Speaking of moving on, we're gonna talk about clarity now. Um, Clarity is about how you present your material to your audience, and that is literally everything. Presentation is literally everything. First off, if you're ever going to be representing a major network or even a small one, you need to sound professional. If you carry yourself inappropriately to how the people running the show, um, you'll be quickly put on a blacklist. I've heard of people who have done one thing at one broadcaster, done something at a different broadcaster, and then once word go, it's a small industry. Word goes out very quick. They never ended up working again in the industry. And speaking about pronunciations, try to learn them ahead of time. This is part of your prepping. You're not going to look at a Greek name and immediately understand how it's pronounced. And it even happens with English names too. Just like your fact checks, make sure you double, triple check the way you're supposed to pronounce things because, you will be called out on that sometimes, but, just let it go off your shoulder. And finally, as much as you might want to, don't wing it. More often than not, you'll find yourself in hot water if you deviate too far off course from the main point of the broadcast, and you will see yourself like the guy who acted inappropriately and unprofessionally. Improv generally only good if you're experiencing technical issues and need to fill time, but overall, top-notch broadcasters never show up unprepared. They always have information at the ready to pull, even if it means they're jotting them down point form on index cards. They always have more information than you need just in case that they need to fill in the time. Otherwise, I would not recommend winging an entire broadcast.
There are gonna be moments where you're gonna have to fill space. Right? So that is where your banter, that is where your relationship with your co-caster or whoever you're with can really shine, and you can kind of individualize yourselves in that way. I think to be a little bit more specific to the esports side of things, winging it would be just being like waking up an hour before sound check, doing all your stuff, showing up on camera, and then you're like, "Wait, so what tournament is this?" Right? Don't do that. It's really important that you have your general understanding because in esports, a lot of things change really quickly, really fast, right? So you got to be on your feet and you got to be really good about how to deal with that information and to share that with your audience without looking like that you're winging it.
Yeah. So moving on, are there any questions? I know that people have asked a couple of questions. Jade Valkyrie, is this going to be available after I missed the first 20 minutes? Yes. I've already recorded it personally on my end, and it will also be available here on Twitch. Um, Basically, we just quickly ran over the ABCs of journalism, how to kind of prep yourself, how to keep your facts accurate, and how to present yourself on camera or behind a microphone. So if you do have more questions and um, whatnot, there's a link here on the screen where you can go to Google, send them in, and I will get them on the Google Slides, or you can send them in here um, in the Twitch chat. Or if there's no more questions, I'm gonna move on. Oh wait, that guy Crasher, what would you say is the best way to get work as an on-air talent?
So, we're going to go over this, but in my opinion, currently, if you're just starting out, it's to find a group of people that, or do it yourself, of that you can just cast over games without the pressure of the audience first, right? So when you do get your gig as on-air talent, you're not going in blind and you've gotten a little bit of experience. So for myself, I started casting over professional videos of Hearthstone tournaments where I would talk over the video. Well, I would watch it on mute and then talk over the video, rewind it, and see if they talked about the same thing. Once I kinda understood that it was pretty similar and I got my head around it, that's when I started reaching out for actual opportunities. And through that, the very next step, and I know we have a whole slide on this, is just kind of network, 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 right? You see unpaid opportunity, go for it, right? Get that experience, get those hours under your belt, right? And then eventually you're gonna feel confident enough to go after those paid opportunities. And you're going to meet people throughout all of these opportunities, just like how I met Topical in Denver just a little while ago. And those could potentially grow into other things, right? So number one, it's just doing it, getting out there, getting on camera for 0 to 5 people, even, right? Number two, it's then finding a support group kind of like Broadcast.gg that's going to help you gain that experience as well. And then once you can go to college, right, you're ready to leave the nest, then it's the networking becomes very, very important.
So yeah, now we're gonna start talking about you as the brand. So this is where your question comes into play, and I gotta do quickly move something from another screen to another. You didn't see anything. So when I talk about you as a brand, what does that mean? It means that you are the face of your own work. So in this type of industry, given where it's a lot of freelance contract work, um, you know, you are your own boss. So you decide how you market yourself, and you have total control over how people perceive you both on and off the air. So being your own boss sounds really dope, but it's a lot of work. You need to be
Super
prepared
hard.
to deal with a lot of people who are literally just like you and want to edge their way further in the industry. So this means you're on top of paperwork, you keep tabs on changes in the industry, and you, more importantly, are up to date on everything relating to what you're doing. So if that means if you're looking to get into Overwatch, spend as much time as you can learning Overwatch, play the game, find out what the heroes and whatnot do. If it's Hearthstone, learn all the cards, learn every move in the book that you can possibly find. Be up to date on what you're doing, because if you do get into those situations where you need to fill in time, you need to know what you're talking about, or even just in general. When we talk about marketing yourself, I'm simply saying that you're selling yourself to other companies. And to some, this can be an either fun or boring process, depending on how you look at it. So this involves being active on social media, having an up to date resume, and more importantly, being really good at interviews if you get interviews. So social media, probably one of the most important things to have in your arsenal for finding work. Um, they open up your professional network and they give you access to certain circles. And it also allows you to promote your work without paying for advertising space. We have a question here. Pink MacGyver. I would love to try casting, but I don't think I have enough technical knowledge of the game. So I wouldn't meet the on-screen expert thing you were talking about before. In what other ways can a caster have value? Can it make up for lacking technical game knowledge, or better to stick to producing?
All right, so I have I said it in chat, but I'm about to pontificate. So what I would say to that is casting will actually get you to that expert level, right? Some of the best ways to kind of see really how these teams are interacting with each other is to cast over them, right? See kind of like what you currently think that you're really knowledgeable about, right? For example, I love Doomfist, and so when I see Doomfist, I speak with absolute confidence when I see him during a cast, right? And so I take that and I build the confidence with that. And then I kind of try to build everything around it, right? It's kind of like, oh, well, in this Doofus Diva or Doofus Reinhardt interaction, right? This like rocket punch into the shield so he's behind the rest of the team. You start learning those little plays as you're casting. And the number one thing is to never feel like you're not going to be an expert, right? Almost every caster in Overwatch League is plat and below. So it's not like we're professionals at the game, right? And so you get to decide what your foothold is, right? So for Ham and I, when we're casting, we realized from very early on that our chemistry was a big selling point for us, right? People know that we're friends. People like watching us because it's like watching, with your friends on the couch, right? We figured that out, and then we made our casting kind of speak to that, and that's the marketing that we've done as well. We take selfies before every game, and that none of that necessarily has anything to do with in-game knowledge. The in-game knowledge will come, and honestly, I think it's one of the easier parts to kind of learn because there's a lot of resources online. What's harder is this, I think, branding section that we're about to go into, right? So you can be an expert, right, in small things that then graduate into the rest of the game. Just because you don't have knowledge now doesn't mean you're going to have no knowledge in a month or two. It's amazing how quickly you can learn these things, especially if you're interested in it. How does one be good at interviews? Um, so I've actually interviewed a lot of people in my time. That's kind of what I did beforehand. And the way that you do it is you have to make the other person feel comfortable, right? And esports is super important because you're not necessarily interviewing the most talkative people uh, all the time, right? So you speak to them beforehand if you can. Give them a heads up on what you're about to ask, so they're not going in blind themselves. And then be yourself. If you project a calm energy and welcoming energy to the player and to the audience, then the interview will go well no matter what.
Yeah, and we'll talk about interviews later on as well in this section of the workshop. Um, Another question here: do you think it's worth, or do you think it's important to make your own website? Um, for me, I have my own website, but it's more or less just for me to have a spot where I can send people to see my portfolio work, because my resume is quite extensive and I have some demos that I want people to go to. So instead of just handing a file or a link somewhere, I just say, go to the website, it's all there. It's neither important nor unimportant. Um, it is a bit of work to keep up to date, though. If you're bad at keeping, stuff like that up to date, then I wouldn't recommend a website. I'd recommend just maybe having a Google Drive or something, or a Dropbox, where you can just send people information, you know, as you need to. One final thing with social media: be mindful of what you post. Dear Lord, managers will audit your accounts and they will ensure that you're being professional on all levels. So again, before you push yourself in a professional world, clean up your social media. If you haven't already, remain professional. People have been denied jobs and have even been fired for having bad posts on social media. I've seen it before. Canada's pretty bad for it. I've seen a lot of broadcasters lose their entire careers over stuff like this. What kind of things will turn managers off, says Pinky MacGyver. What constitutes a bad post is really, obviously you don't want to, be shirtless and, chugging a cold one, with out with the buys, having a rip. You don't want to be seen doing something that's considered a little scandalous. You
When
know,
you're in esports, it can be very hard to kind of navigate this world because we have a lot of banter. I mean, just today, I think I lost some followers because NA won, and I went a little hard on some trash talk. So it's I think you as a person kind of understand where that line is. And in esports, sometimes you get rewarded for being on the line or being a little in front of it. Some of our most popular personalities probably have some of the worst social media takes out there. It's all about really how professional do you want to come across, right? If you want to be that person who has spicy takes and goes after things, you can do that. But there's, I think, a right way to do that. If you want to be the funny person with jokes, again, you can do that. But I think there's, a spectrum of these people are really great at it. These people are average at it because of how they go about it. But here in esports, or just in life in general, do not write or post anything that you would be super afraid of your mom kind of reading. It's kind of how I do it.
do you talk to your grandmother with that kind of voice? Yeah,
Yep.
no, it, and obviously, again, like within the last 4 or 5 years, a lot of big name celebrities, even outside of broadcasting, it's the comments that you post online are basically there forever. And obviously, I get it. Maybe when you were in high school, you did that stupid thing with the pickup truck, or you flashed your chest on a roller coaster ride or something. It's a lot of stupid things that can get you into the stupidest amount of trouble. Um, did audio die? Anybody else hearing me here?
All right, just you.
Yep, it's just Mushu.
Quick, make fun of me. Can't hear. Post it on social media.
um, so yeah, social media. Be careful, be professional, and don't be afraid to share the links.
Yeah,
Share your
I've
work.
gone through a lot of like Twitter posts where I type it out and I'm like, no, and then I delete it all, and then I write out another one, and I'm like, no, still not good. Right? It's just kind of trust your gut in this situation, and if you mess up, people will tell you, and then be an adult about it, right? Be like, I messed up, or I this is why I don't think I messed up, right? But the worst thing you could do is ruin your career by putting something that's obviously distasteful on the internet because it's there forever as well.
Any tips on coming up with interesting posts? Don't try to be interesting. Be yourself, but have discretion.
That, I think that's it. That's great. Nailed it.
People are going to your social media because they want to peek at your own personal life behind the scenes. So be
Mm-hmm.
authentic. And again, I'm
Yep.
going to talk about that later on as well. Okay, resumes are probably one of the most important things you can have when you're looking for work. They are generally a one-page summary of your experience in a given field. Generally, you want to stay within one page, and I don't mean front and back, I mean literally one page. Um, any more than that, hiring managers will not want to read anymore. How do you grab that attention in such a short amount of time? Use buzzwords to hook managers into wanting to hear more. And don't forget to follow your ABCs of journalism. Keep it clean and clear to read. A good resume isn't filled to the brim. Give them the basics they need to know and leave gaps on purpose for them to ask questions. Once they start asking questions, then you've opened the door, you know, to a new opportunity. What if your problem is not enough on the resume
That's a
yet?
great question, because that's just like a I'm graduating college thing in general. Don't worry about it because a lot of employers, if they're already speaking to you, will understand that you're just coming out of college, and the amount of words on your resume doesn't necessarily correlate to your worth as a potential worker, right? Your resume is there to represent yourself in the best way possible, right? You're going to change things as you grow up. So when I left high school, things like being a section leader in marching band were on my resume. Now I've taken that all out. I've gotten enough work experience to just do work stuff, but it definitely went through some iterations.
Yeah, and even for me, like I update my I update my LinkedIn. I update my resume monthly. Um, and for me, I'm a little bit of a weird situation. I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to work in radio for 2 years prior to going to college, and then I ended up quitting that job just so that I could go back to school. But I can be straight up honest. It doesn't matter how nice your resume is. You know, you will be turned down for jobs. I'm not gonna lie. You can be turned down for jobs regardless of how nice your resume is. Just in the last month alone, I've been turned down by 5 different jobs in my field. And kind of giving a ditto to what Boop just said in the chat. Volunteer work is easy to find. Um, Here locally, local TV station is all run by volunteers. There's only about 9 or 10 full time paid staff, and I've been volunteering with them since October. Since October, I've done an entire season of hockey broadcasts. So we're setting up the cameras, we're doing the audio checks, we're we have a broadcast truck and everything. So I did a whole season of that, doing a lot of studio shows, and now it's to the point where I've been with them so long, they know what I want to do in my career, and they're giving me the opportunity to try out things like hosting. Um, so once you walk through that door, then you've proven yourself as exceptional on paper, but now you have to prove it in person. You were called into an interview because they saw something in your resume that made them want to inquire further. So be professional, but also be yourself. So you don't want to fabricate anything like your personality. You want them to feel comfortable about being in the room with them. Obviously, you want to sell yourself, but there is such a thing as overdoing it. Find your limits and play within them. You want to leave a little bit of intrigue behind. You know, give them a reason to hire you over the next guy. Oh,
And in esports, you're not really going to have person-to-person interviews that often. A lot of mine have been through Skype, but that doesn't mean don't dress up. That doesn't mean don't try as hard. It's really important to um, when you're also interviewing. And a word that we've been using again is be authentic, right? They're hiring you, and what makes you authentic can be that thing that puts you over the edge and why they choose you over somebody else. Again, even though you can be authentic, you still might get denied for a job, right? But I like to look at those things as happy little accidents, as Bob Ross would say, and just move on. Try to learn from it, see what I might have said, and just change something up for the next time, right? It's an iterative process. If someone has figured out how to interview, then everyone would have jobs, and that's not the case right now. So when you go into it, also practice, right? Interview yourself in the mirror. Have someone else interview you beforehand, right? Even if they don't know anything about esports or broadcast, a lot of our parents and a lot of people who are older than us and our colleagues have been through these interviews and would be happy to support you through your process of preparing for a potential job.
Another really important thing when it comes to being in broadcasting in general, have a demo reel.
Demo reel.
Demo reels are your video slash audio resume. So a paper resume is great, a demo reel, even greater. Um, literally, should not be more than 2 to 3 minutes. Your very first clip should be your absolutely best clip because you want to highlight your best moments. Literally, you have less than 15 seconds, sometimes even less than that, to wow somebody. You know? Oh, I wrote 10
If you
seconds. Ha!
if you're applying to be a host, a lot of demo reels have been requested from me of doing like an introduction at the beginning. It's kind of like a cold open, and so they kind of see how you would intro a tournament, right? I'm Chris Bupasaurus Lassard. I've been doing Overwatch Contenders for the last 2 seasons. Blah 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 blah. And so on the reel, there's 3 things that I've identified in terms of how mine has gotten feedback. One, again, authenticity. Number 2 is that you know your shit. I don't know the profanity rules. I apologize if I just broke them. And then number 3 is you have to show a glimmer of that personality. If you show a bunch of clips of just clean casting, I think you're missing a part of yourself, right? So if you're gonna highlight yourself, those are kind of like the 3 things. Highlight your authenticity, highlight your professionalism and expertise. And then number 3 is just kinda like whatever that special sauce is, right? For Ham and I, it's our jokes, right? So I've had 1 or 2 jokes just put in there to just kinda show that we have that look, right? We can be serious, we can be silly and meme, right? But what I've represented is we have control over all of that.
Yeah. A question here. What should you focus on if you want to make a highlight reel? Any recommendations for video editors? Um, again, highlight the best moments. You know, what do you feel paints a very good picture of you? What is probably some of your best moments on camera or behind a microphone?
And that requires you to watch yourself, which is hard,
It is
but you have to do
very
it.
difficult to watch yourself because everybody is their own worst critic. And I've tried to make reel after reel after reel and tried to keep it short and simple and to the point, but it's tough. Even for people who are seasoned, it is very tough to look at yourself and say, "This is my best thing ever."
Or I have a huge personality flaw. Just kidding. But like I was a music major in school, so there's a lot of self review in terms of hearing myself on recordings and seeing myself on camera. And 10 years later, it's still really hard. You just have to go into it and not echo chamber yourself. Like, try to really see the good too, because when you go into self thought review, you're usually looking for mistakes. Since you made them, you know where they are. You're going to focus on them, and that'll just make you depressed. So you also have to go into it and see what was successful as well. When it comes to growth based learning, you have to grow that over things that you're good at. If you're always focusing on what you're poor at, most likely the progress isn't gonna be as good as if you're like, "You know what? I'm really good at casting, hype moments. How can I use what I know that I'm good at to support all the things that I might need some extra help with?"
Another question. How do you tell what a best moment is to a manager? Are they looking for high energy moments, good insights? That's a really good question.
So, how do you tell it kinda depends on what the crowd is, like, into, right? Because, I'll use Ham and I as another example. We are admittedly not for everybody. We have a very unique style. If you're into it, you're super into it. If not, you're super not into it. But usually on the super not into it, we wanna show that we can cast clean and we don't have to be, I guess, as ham and boop as we wanna be. Uh But really what it comes down to is I also don't want you to sacrifice yourself, right? If you notice that your boss is just, like, not into it, sometimes it's good to kinda evaluate your situation. Um, your manager is gonna be the one that determines if you come back or not, so you either have to go all in on what the manager says, right, because that's what he wants to see, or, kind of establish something else, and so, make him or her, love what you're offering, even though it might not be that person's cup of tea in general, and the only way to get there is through reps.
Do apologize for that little pop up in the bottom corner there, by the way. Forgot to mute something. Um, is it maybe a good idea to have a buddy to swap VODs with for review to be less self critical or something? If you're beginning, maybe, but to be quite honest, I'd say rather no, and I'll tell you why. It sounds cruel to put you through that, but you need to learn to be able to look at yourself and kind of turn off your brain for a minute. You need to be able to look at yourself and say to yourself, "Okay, here's what I did very well. Here's what I could have improved on. Here's what I want to showcase." So when it comes to your demo, I say basically showcase demos on specific things. So if you want to do casting, have a casting demo. But if you want to make a jump into, maybe hosting, have a different reel just for hosting. Don't put the same stuff or don't put different things together. Puzzle pieces are meant to work together. So if you start swapping pieces out from a different puzzle, it ain't gonna look as pretty. Um,
And
so yeah.
it's not either or. You have to do both. Because eventually you're gonna stop seeing some things, right? You're gonna need an outside influence who is, hopefully at a higher stage than you in your career that you respect and look up to and will listen to that feedback appropriately, because you're gonna learn more things about yourself that way too. You do have to watch yourself though, because you're not gonna receive that help. You're available, right? You're you, but you're gonna have to schedule the VOD review with me or with Doa or Monte Cristo, right? Uh, and our access isn't as much. So definitely self VOD review. I like to do it at least 2 to 3 times a week, um, and then really also at that point too, after you've done it quite a bit, then get that outside influence as well. Same thing with your game tape or your reel. Y Show it to us, right? I've had my reel shown to a lot of people, and I've gotten feedback from them. Just don't be afraid to get support too. It's super nerve-wracking, but you're never gonna get over it unless you do it.
Um, we don't have a slide on this, but networking. Networking is
Yeah.
very important. Unfortunately, there's not always a chance where a job posting is readily available. It's about who you know and where are they at. So, to be quite honest, if I wanted to get a job at my previous radio station, I know everybody. I'm buddies with all of them. I could probably very easily find something for me to do in that building. That being said, networking is also about getting your name out there to multiple people. You go to TwitchCon or some big event like that, or anything else that involves esports or any type of broadcast work.
Networking is arguably one of the most important skills in your professional life. As you said, there are gonna be times when job postings don't happen. It's just because of who you know, right? It's like, "Oh, I've worked with Boop before. Let me just call that guy because I know he does good stuff." Right? And I maybe unfairly get an opportunity because I was easiest to access and my work's already been done. Audio, you have an amazing question, and it's something in esports that is very common. Is a lot of us, work from home. We're our own bosses, right? So how do you go out and network? The best way to do it is through groups like Broadcast.gg. We've gotten opportunities because of Broadcast.gg. A lot of casting pairs have met because of Broadcast.gg. Producers have met, tournament organizers, all because of the Discord, right? But these things aren't going to come to you. You have to go out and search for these things and network yourself. If there's an introduction area, introduce yourself, right? Don't just join a Discord and expect to get something out of it. You will bear the fruit that you worked for, right? So even though you're by yourself, online communities do exist, and you have to take advantage of those. There's Broadcast GG, there's Outlet, there's tons of production slash tournament. Like Horizon has one for Overwatch specifically. You just have to ask around and try to find them.
How do you show your worth to people you meet at events? I have a good time with people I meet regularly and become friends with them, but people I meet just one time, I'm not sure how to show to them I'm worth keeping in mind. It's
Um,
interesting
Very good
because
question.
another question that followed up with that was are business cards outdated? No, they are
No.
not.
Especially if you're younger. So I used to work for a company called Boulder Games, and I was the hiring manager for them. And at least for me, if like a 19-year-old came up to me with a card, I'm like, wow, you were much better than me than when I was 19. Right? It's super impressive, and it's one of those things that only adds and doesn't take away. So why not? Right? And in terms of like being at an event, those business cards might be the only way they remember you. We meet hundreds of people at BlizzCons, at PAX, right? There is no way we're going to remember, Chris Bupasaurus Lassard unless you either do something really crazy or terrible with this person, right? Or you like threw up because you were too drunk. I remember that guy. He's the one that threw up. Don't be that person. But your business card or some type really your business card is going to be the way that they look at something and be able to potentially bring that name to a face and remember you in general. There is no right or wrong answer when it comes to when you're at an event, how do you become memorable? Just go up to them because a lot of people really respect people who show that initiative, right? You don't want to be crazy stalker, right? But if you see an opportunity, maybe they're at, at a booth and they're willing to talk to some people, go up there, be like, "Hey, I'm Chris. I'm a caster. I really love your work. If there's anything I can help support you on, I'd love to learn more about those opportunities. Here's my business card. I'd love to chat more." And sometimes that's where it ends, and sometimes they birth opportunities.
A great question here. What info is important on the card? Just name, pic, or logo, and some kind of contact. All right. Fun fact: I'm also a graphic designer. I'm a man of many hats. I also make music. But yeah. So as a graphic designer, um, generally, yeah, the most important info is your name. You don't need to have a photo of yourself on there. If you have some type of a logo, sweet. You can use that to your advantage. That's part of your branding. For me, about every year, I tend to change my own personal logo. And this year, it's something that I might actually keep for a while. And always have contact information. So, phone number, email, website if you have it, and possibly social media. And you know what? There's a couple of great websites that I can already recommend you to. The first one, Vistaprint.
A
Vistaprint.com is the by far best, cheapest, you
You
know.
get your first 200 for free.
Yep. And you know what? If you want 100 cards, guess what? $10.
Yep.
Um,
So another pro tip coming from me, I like to leave a blank space at some point in my business card. So if they want to write a note about me, they have a space on the card to do that.
yep. And my partner does the same thing. His cards, it's very, very well put together from a graphic design standpoint. And then on the back, it's completely blank. It is completely blank so that if he needs to write down notes or somebody else needs to write down notes, guess what? You got a free space to do it. Um,
Yeah.
Another website that I'll recommend, it's a little more pricey, but there's some interesting stuff that you can do with it. It's called moo.com. So it's moo.com. Another question. How much might you charge to design a card for somebody? Sorry if this isn't the place to ask.
I think we should move on from that one because I think people are interested in like the casting stuff too.
Yeah,
And so let's
it's,
wrap up networking.
yeah. Oh, by the way, throughout all of this, be authentic. Be
Yeah. Um,
authentic.
and I want everyone in chat to know, I am really open to helping anyone out who wants to come into this industry. I want to make sure that this industry becomes standardized, and the best way to do that is to help the next generation of people who are going to be on camera potentially. I want them to be better than me. I want them to have more support than I did, right? And so whatever I can do to help you guys out, please message me. I'll look at your stuff. I'll look at your business cards, and I'll give you feedback. And to kind of like close up this networking thing, a lot of the things that we're talking about, it's really easy to kind of look at yourself like, oh, this is hard. I don't know if I can do that, or I might not have the skills currently to do that. Neither did I, right? I had to fail a couple times. I had to fall on my face a couple times, and then I learned through it. The thing about networking is if you're not yourself, it will not work. And that also, you have to go out there and put yourself out there. 9 times out of 10, people aren't gonna come up to you and be like, "Oh, you're interested in casting, right? Well, I'm doing this casting school." Right? No, it's up to you to go apply, right? So, to be authentic, networking, super, super important, but if you're starting at the early end, the most important thing is just developing those skills.
Okie dokie. Questions. Immediately got a question from audio. Can you guys introduce yourself again? Quick. I don't know whose voice is whose. So I'm Corey. Um, I work in local television on the side. A couple of years in radio. Yeah.
And I'm Chris, colloquially known or professionally known as Boop, which is a funny sentence.
Boop.
And I am a professional caster, currently casting for Overwatch Contenders North America.
Yeah. Again, if at any time anybody has questions, by all means, like we've been answering them as we go through. This is a little longer than we thought it would be. I promise you, there are only 10 more slides left, and then we will answer any further questions at the end. Um, so bear with us. With all of that out of the way, let's ask ourselves, what's in a host? So a good host usually consists of the following, or any on-camera personality. They are confident in their own abilities. They are knowledgeable in the topics they are covering. They present themselves in a professional manner. They are clearly understood, so pronunciation and enunciation are key points to take note of. And finally, they have personality. Personality is a big deal. So why is it
It's part of
important?
your brand.
You know, you need to be able to relate to your audience. You really do. Um, your audience will be listening to you for a decent amount of time, and they need to feel like they're part of the story just as much as you are. So obviously, don't be monotonous in your speaking. Any monotony is a recipe for a bad broadcast or some backlash from the audience. You want to be animated, have some energy, and overall have fun with it. If you don't have fun, then what's the point of doing this? You said that getting free gigs is the best way to start, but it feels like there should be a step beforehand. What can I do before diving in, or is that how you learn to swim?
You you need to, like I said in there, it's all about providing yourself low pressure situations to improve. And so the way that I did that at the beginning was just taking VODs, muting them, and casting over them, right? There's actually a caster in Elo Hell right now, Possible, and his audition was a solo VOD that he just did himself. It was the first ever cast he did, and he nailed it. And so it's all about just like going for it, right? So if you want to kind of dip your toe in the water, take your favorite game, maybe even with your favorite team, because you're probably going to be the most knowledgeable about it, and do it. And so it's actually really interesting because me and Corey are hosts. So I got most of my experience hosting before I got into casting. And so everything that he said so far is so important to recognize, particularly on this hosting side, because there is nothing that'll kill a broadcast more than this guy. Hey, everyone, welcome back to Overwatch Contenders. My name is Chris Bupasaurus Lassard, and we're going to have a great time. Did anything I just say sound like we were going to have a great time? Right? You don't want to, I think, because a lot of the time you're sharing the stage with someone, you don't and the don't be too animated, right? Or trying to be the star. In my opinion, the host is who directs a broadcast, and it's your job to kind of be the leader of where things are going. You do that by asking questions and by going to different segments, right? The host also doesn't necessarily need to be the most knowledgeable about the subject that you're hosting on, because when you're kind of learning a little bit, you get to ask really great questions, because what you're wondering about is most of the time also what your audience is wondering about.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about being a host. So when we talk about being a host, we're talking about you're not the caster, you're not the one making the calls and saying, "Oh my god, look at Doomfist right now making a wonderful play for the point." No, you're not the play-by-play, you're not the color. You are, strictly speaking, the tying piece. You are basically the moderator for all of these, very high energy people. Your job is to ensure that the show is running smoothly, that it's actually on time, and that, if people are, kind of going off course, they're going back on course. And I'm pretty sure I have a slide coming up that details that. Um, Very, very briefly, vocal training. In no way am I a professional vocal training coach or anything like that. But your voice is a very important instrument, and like any instrument, it requires practice. Now, you're probably wondering, well, I talk every day. How is that not practice enough? Well, let me tell you that normal talking is not the same as talking for broadcast or voiceover. You are extending your range more and talking more frequently than you were in conversation. Therefore, you need to maintain it regularly. This means doing things like drinking hot tea with lemon and honey, plenty of water, and even, doing vocal workouts or warm ups. So, some examples of some warm ups, as I also tried to declaw my cat from my chair. The 1-1-2-1 warm up. So, this is a chromatic scale where you start at 1 and keep adding numbers up to 5. And after every scale, you go up a semitone. So, it goes like 1 1 2 1 1 2 3 2 1 1 2 3 4 3 2 1 1
So
2
for
3 4
those of
5 4
you
3 2
at
1.
home that don't know what chromatic or semitone means, it's just every note that's coming out there. So you're hitting every vocal tone, and all of this stuff is available for free online.
Yeah.
Don't feel like you need to like buy a vocal trainer, right? A lot of this stuff is online.
YouTube. YouTube is the best spot to go. Um, when I say go up a semitone, once you do the 1 2 3 4 5 through 2 1 2 3 4 5 4 3 2 1 you're going up a semitone, so you're going 1 1 2 1 1 2 3 2 1 1 2 3 4 3 2 1 1 2 3 4 5 3 2 1 and you just keep going up until you feel like you're done. Tongue twisters, very easy to do. And after practicing long enough, you'll find that you can enunciate better. That's the whole point of those. Um, very famous ones. She sells seashells by the seashore, or
I like Toy Boat,
toy boat. I was about to
that one.
say that. I have two favorite ones. Mine is Betty bought some butter, but that butter was too bitter, so she bought some better butter so her batter wasn't bitter. It's a long one,
So,
but it's funny.
and the reason why you do this, again, it's enunciation. And remember, if you're going to be an on-camera talent, you're getting paid because of your voice. And things like vocal nodes ruin careers, right? Julie Andrews, right, is one of them. And so, Adele is struggling with the vocal nodes too. Some of the best singers of our time have been taken down because they're not speaking healthily. I do not speak healthily when I cast. This is something that I'm really, really focusing on, and is pretty important. Not, I think, at the beginning. Once you kind of decide that this is something you want to put time into, that's when I would start exploring this part of casting.
Yeah, this is a bit of a more um I don't want to say advanced, but it's a more intermediate level of, doing on-air work. Another type of training that you can do is any type of vocal cord warm-up. So, um, if you ever saw High School Musical and you remember that lovely blondie named Sharpay, she always went ba ba ba. Um, Again, I'm no expert when it comes to vocal training, but that basically opens up your cords. It it tightens them and then releases them, tightens them and releases them. It's stretching them and kind of making them do weird wibbly wobbly things. Yep, another good one here. Sirens are great. So doing these types of warm ups, you want to generally do them for maybe about 5 minutes prior to every broadcast you do. It makes your vocal cords stretch out and ensure you don't strain yourself.
I like to do it. So the way that Ham and I do it, we usually do like 5 to 10 minutes of this kind of stuff. I love tongue twisters. I do play by play, so I'm the one that's kind of talking the most. So tongue twisters are super helpful. And then we will always cast like a round of control before we get on there. So like when you're on camera, it's not the first time you're casting a game that day. You've actually gotten some vocal stuff in there. It's the same reason why you would like take a quick jog, before you're running a race, right? You need to be warm. Your vocal cords are, a muscle that you have to work out and take care of. This is how you do it.
Yeah. And again, like I said, hot tea, probably one of the best things to have next to water. I do not recommend coffee. I really don't, because coffee,
Dehydrates you.
it really does. It dehydrates you so much. That's why I recommend hot tea with lemon and honey. Honey will it's a natural medicine. It coats your throat, makes it so that it doesn't start scratching against itself, and by the end of the day you're talking like this and you don't sound very nice. No, you don't. Try casting like this. Don't want to lose your voice after a while. And I've seen people have it happen before. On camera. If you're going to be on camera, dress appropriately. Semi-formal and formal wear is acceptable forms of attire for appearing on camera. Don't show up to a broadcast in jeans and a t-shirt unless it is, um
It's kind of
act-
like the shtick they're going for. Sometimes that's a thing.
yeah. If you ever watch anything, Overwatch League, League of Legends, all of those big tournaments, and every single on-air talent, they are in formal wear. They are always like suit, tie, shirt, dress pants, dress shoes. They look like they're on point. They are really on point. Um,
I
I
would not recommend like a tuxedo
No,
or
you don't need
something
to
you'd
go
wear to
tuxedo.
prom. But like your Sunday's best, I think would be good. Usually, usually events that you're doing will have a dress code, so just follow that.
Yeah. I generally would recommend a dress shirt on its own with a tie or coupled with a blazer to make it into kind of a simple, two-piece suit. I own a few jackets myself. There's certain stores that I shop at specifically, and I should really talk to about getting, some sponsorships, but that's another thing. Remember to blink. Don't get tunnel vision. If you're new to being in front of a camera, you will often get tunnel vision and forget to blink. And
It's so funny. That's so true.
it's especially hilarious when there's a teleprompter there. Um, you know, if you're new
We
to
don't get a lot of those.
yeah, if you are using a teleprompter for any reason and you're new to it, blink because people will watch the text scroll up the screen and you're like, "Oh my god, I'm reading this as it's going. I got to keep my eyes open so that I don't miss anything." Tunnel vision's
Um,
really it's both it both sucks and it's also funny for whoever's in the control room.
speaking of vision, for those of us who wear glasses, because I've gotten caught for this, remember that your glasses reflect what you're looking at on the. So if you're like on a podcast or something and you're like browsing Twitter, we can see that if you're wearing glasses. So be mindful of that.
Yeah, and if possible, see if you can get some anti-glare lenses. Studio lights are very bright and often very reflective on glass. And always assume that the camera is on the air. So don't be picking your
Hmm.
nose or doing something you shouldn't be in front of the camera. Um, Trust
Same thing
me.
with your microphone. Assume
And
it's always on.
yep, and speak of the devil behind a microphone. A lot of the same things apply for radio production as well. Dress appropriately for the work environment. Yes, some radio stations, including the one I worked at, you could show up in jeans as long as they weren't ripped. Um, and if you had a shirt on, some people wore band shirts because that's what their station promoted. Other people, like myself, I chose to show up in an actual dress shirt and sometimes a sweater to go over top. Remember to breathe. Don't try to say everything in one breath. So, again, don't be the rap god. And the same thing applies to being on camera. Always assume the mic is hot. And yes, in radio terms, we say that it's hot as opposed to being on. You don't want to accidentally swear on the air as well. Watch your language, people. Don't let your
Yeah,
kids watch this.
I've gotten in trouble for that.
Yeah, and I know
So
people. I know people. If it slips out one time and it's not like you, you'll get a little tiny slap on the wrist and say, "Okay, well, don't let it happen again." But if it happens more than once, you're gone. And here in Canada, I don't know how it is in the States, but if you're caught anywhere in broadcast radio or television, you are heavily fined. And we're talking like it's hefty. You can lose your job over it. The station will lose a lot of, ad revenue from it because they're now having to pay a fine on top of you being fined. It is tough up here in Canada.
in esports, a lot of the time you're not going to get like the networks like NBC finding you. You're usually going to get a little bit more leeway, but that doesn't mean don't. It doesn't mean like go ahead and drop the F bomb, right? It's just it's good to just not use profanity because if you're using it, then it's because you're running out of words to say. And if you are going to use it, like on a podcast or something, and you've gotten approval, make sure it has impact.
Yeah. Um for one word, no, it's not. It's if it's just a one word thing and it slips out, then it's usually just a slap on the wrist, but I know I've heard of people who and even in other places, they get fired for kind of cursing a little too much or being a little too hot-headed, yelling at people who are listening and calling in. It's very tough. You have to, again, you have to show professionalism and some discretion. This is a career. If this is what you're going to be making a living off of, you don't want to jeopardize that. But talk normally. You know, conversate or converse or whatever the word is. Yes, talk to the mic like it's your mother. But if you don't have a problem with it, don't worry about it. 3 important questions to ask if you want to be on air are as follows. What makes yourself unique? What's your shtick? So essentially, do you have that one advantage or that one thing that can make you different than all the others? And finally, how can you use your quirks to your advantage? So
Hey, this is like the Bulbasaur slide.
being able to figure out what makes you different than everybody else is key to honing your skills as an on-air talent.
and it's gonna get you hired because if I wanted another Monte Cristo, I have Monte Cristo. Why do I need another person who's trying to be like Monty, right? So you got to go into this again, being yourself and being authentic. Ham and I have realized exactly how we want to present ourselves. We know what makes us different, and we like what makes us different. So we kind of lean into it a little bit more. For people who like watch League of Legends, I think Kobe's shtick is amazing, right? He's just so authentic, right? And then Ezreal and Mr. Flowers, they have their shtick too as friends. Even today I was just watching. Oh, I'm going to be the Skarner expert today, right? It's okay to have fun, right? And you get to have fun when you're yourself, right? But if you're constantly emulating other people, you lose yourself. And I'm just going to hire someone else because I already have you. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And to quote V for Vendetta, which is a fantastic movie if you haven't seen it, you wear a mask for so long, you soon forget who the person was underneath. That's not a direct quote. I'm pretty sure I'm paraphrasing some of that there, but the point still stands. Um, Obviously, everybody is different at their own position on the experience spectrum, but a lot of these practices can be shared amongst all of you. When it comes to training yourself, there are a few methods you can do to make your future content better than the previous. Review VODs of previous work you've done. So watch what you do, critique yourself based on what you did well, what you could have done better in. If you're looking, into play-by-play or color work, watch replays of matches, commentate over top of them. A lot of what I'm saying here is, stuff that we've already mentioned a few times. Read articles and news stories on the topics you're following. Being up to date on the information important to your industry or your, chosen game is key in being well trained. And finally, ask questions. People everywhere have answers based on their own experiences, and while not everybody has the same ideas, it's often helpful to ask and see what answers you get. Asking questions while the resources are there is by far the most rewarding of all methods, and even getting critique from others besides yourself is a great way to figure out who you are, but also what you are and aren't good at. So what can you do right now? Well, firstly, ask yourself the questions that you want the answers to. Write them down. Spend a serious amount of time finding those answers. What can I do better? What goals do I have, both short and long term? Where do I want to be a year from now? You'll also want to practice, whether it be hosting, casting, or doing other on air work. It's always beneficial to have spent time to use the equipment you have to create more content. Finally, learn. Learn from yourself and learn from others. At the end of the day, your job is to facilitate a story and showcase the facts to an audience. Finally, what is success? Well, it's when you have fun. Ultimately, you want to enjoy what you're doing. If you aren't enjoying it, then by all means, try something new. This industry is constantly growing, so never be afraid to dip your toes into something new. There's always new things being created, so have fun with it. It really, I can't really explain it any better than that. Have fun with it. This is one of the greatest industries and one of the most fastest growing ones in the world right now, especially in such an era when digital content is at its highest. What is success? What is a success? When you have fun.
It is not viewer related. It is not job related, right? It is if you are enjoying yourself, right? Do not feel like your value is determined by how many viewers you have because you're probably not going to have any to start, right? Those will come, but you've got to have a good time doing it. If not, everything will just be hard.
Yeah. Thank you guys very much for listening to us yammer on for the past hour and a half. For the final time, are there any final questions over things we have covered today, things we might not have covered? I know there were some questions earlier about how to be good at casting. I personally feel that a different presentation entirely on its own is can be relatable to casting because there are very certain techniques and advanced skills that are required for casting and play by play and color and whatnot. So I feel like that is a separate workshop on its own.
I do think it might be worth just talking about what play-by-play color is, just because that is pretty basic. If you realize, like, if you're watching Overwatch League or League of Legends, in the highlight reel, it's usually just one caster, right? It's like Dilla or ZP or myself. So play-by-plays talk over the action. We're telling that story of what you're seeing on screen. We get to drop some color, or it's like you could see my air quotes, and provide information, but your partner, the color caster, is the one kind of like filling in the blanks of what the play-by-play said and telling you why what you just saw happen. And so play-by-play is kind of the person talking over the action, and color is the one that's telling you why that action happened.
Yeah. Let's see. Last quick question here. From audio, if you want to get started in esports, would it be better to tunnel in and specify on one game you like, or try to broaden your skills across multiple games for the most work?
You're going to find different answers from different people for this one, because in my opinion, you have to be able to cast multiple games in order to have a long career. Because games like StarCraft or League of Legends that have been around for 10 years are very, very rare. So you kind of have to expect that this game might potentially not be around as a competitive esports scene in 6 months. Like Heroes of the Storm, right? So I think you have to have at least a couple games in your repertoire, but definitely like in your top 3 games, definitely focus on one. When I was learning when I was learning Overwatch, I'm sorry, I was also pretty good at Hearthstone, and I was also pretty good at fighting games. But Overwatch was my favorite, so 85 to 90% of my time was in developing Overwatch. And then once you can cast a single FPS or once you cast a single MOBA, learning the other ones become much easier. It's a lot harder to go from like a MOBA to a fighter, or a fighter to a game like Apex Legends. People do it all the time, but I think it's good just to have a couple more games in the back pocket. And then Pinky, in terms of, do you think it's different for women to try to cast, or are they judged differently? Unfortunately, I do think they are judged differently. Some common things that I hear that I believe are unfortunate circumstances in the field when it comes to women play-by-plays is that it's hard to listen to your voice. Don't listen to that. It's not true. It is a little harder, but I think if I'm being like realistic with you, my co-caster is a woman, and she has, definitely gotten some more stuff than me, and on the negative side, I think based on that. I think it doesn't happen as frequently as I think people assume it does, but there are some bad fruits, out in the world. And so, like, I wouldn't worry about it. There are also tons upon tons upon tons of allies. Some of the better casters I like in Overwatch right now, like Lemon, are women. And so if someone tells you something like, "Oh, I don't like your voice," I get that all the time, actually. Just be like, "Screw you." That's not really someone to get feedback from. Yeah.
What do you think about chat interaction while casting? Obviously, there's usually a delay, so it's
Do
hard.
not ever do it.
Yeah.
Ever.
Generally, if you're watching Overwatch League or whatever, they don't even talk about the chat. The chat is literally like one ginormous internet couch, and you're all watching it together. Um, it's like watching a sports broadcast on TV. You're not talking to the casters, you're not talking to the commentators or the hosts. You're there to watch entertainment and to be informed on what's going on in a potential esport or any type of, you know, topic that you're interested in.
And sometimes they type some really mean things in Twitch chat, and that's not going to help you cast. So, like, don't go on Reddit, don't go on Twitter, don't go, watch yourself on Twitch while you're casting. It will only take away from the experience. Um, yeah, yeah, and I think that kind of just don't do it. It's kind of a cardinal rule when it comes to casting and casters. Just don't look at Twitch chat.
Yeah. And once again, if you're working for like Overwatch and whatnot, you don't generally see the chat anyways. Your biggest concern is what's going on in the game and how can you make that, how can you make that work to your story, you know. The whole point of being on air is you're facilitating a story.
Hmm. Hmm. So, yeah, if there's no more questions, I just want to say one more thing going back to like the women in esports thing. I just want to reiterate that there are tons of allies, and when you do find yourself in a moment of struggle or something that you need help with, there are communities out there that will help you through those things. I've only really seen it personally 2 or 3 times in, like, the 3 to 4 years that I've been in esports, but I can't, like, go out there and be like, "It has never happened," right? Because I've seen it happen with my own eyes, but it's super rare. So don't go in there expecting that just y that bad things will happen, because they probably won't. And no matter who you are, how old you are, what lifestyle you have, um, you can be a caster. You can be a producer. You can be anyone you want to be in this industry because you can, and no one can tell you otherwise. And so please, please, please don't let any of that, push yourself back. If you're worried about coming into this, regardless of who you are, um, there are people out there that'll help you out. So please just reach out. Reach out to me. I'm always down to answer questions and have conversations, and we'll help you throughout the process. We really, really want the next generation of casters to be more supported than the ones before it, and the one after that's going to be more supported than the one after that. But the big thing is esports is, I think, neutral in all aspects. No matter who you are, you can be successful in this industry. You just have to put in the work to do it.
All right. Well, I don't see any more questions, so I'm going to go ahead and end today's workshop. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening to us yammer on for quite a while. Join BGG. If you're not already in the Discord, please join it. I'm sure all the information is readily available to you here on the Twitch or anywhere else that you might be watching this in the future. We are all around to have answers for your questions. Hopefully, we can do more classes like this in the future. So, if there's something that you specifically think would garner a full on hour long workshop, then by all means, give us some suggestions. We want to teach you. That's what we're here for. We're not. I wouldn't say that we're full on experts, and qualified to be professors or anything, but I think being in the industry, it gives us a good chance to teach you what you need to know. So thanks again, and we will catch you next time.